Okay, we'll get started. Welcome to this Tuesday, January 8th, special school board work session. Thank you all for joining us this evening. The format is kind of a work in progress. As we discussed in this morning's work session, we'll start with a roundtable by the board members, and then we'll follow with comments from the public. So for you folks that came to offer comments, please bear with us, and we will get to you, and you will have an opportunity to share your thoughts with us. So with that, we'll start with the roundtable. We'll start with Mrs. Miller, if you'd like to kick us off.
I actually need 1 minute because I was pulling something up here that's been a little slow. Ms.
Okay.
Courtney, I could defer to you if you're...
Okay. Ms. Courtney?
Well, I think I pretty much said what I needed to say today. I would like to see us in our strategic plan focus on equipping each school site with at least one social worker, because I feel like the home visits are so important, and we're missing that connection from school to home, identifying our kids' needs. And then hopefully some sort of mental health professional at each school site. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. That's my main concern right now.
Yeah, and I think you'd also suggested an advisory.
Yes, which I was hoping, and I think that's already going to be on an agenda item. I was hoping to gather together staff and students. We have an ESC advisory council, we have other advisory councils, and I would love to tap into the experience and resources that we have available to us right here in our county, so that we can avoid some of the mistakes or communication or rollout, or, you know, and I'll give an example. The new Focus gradebook, you know, as a classroom teacher, I had no idea when we went to get trained for our big 45-minute training, nothing worked. And so there we sat. So it was up to us to figure out individually or as a small group of people who wanted to put grades on there, you know, that kind of thing. Had we been asked as classroom teachers, we might have asked if we could possibly have kept Pinnacle until we were all trained appropriately on Focus. All it did was create stress. I don't know what else to say. You know, for not just the classroom teachers, but our testing coordinators and everything. You know, anything that was on the school site. So that's what I'm looking at with an advisory council, and get student input. You know.
They're very smart.
Yes, they are. They can figure out stuff quicker than most of us all put together.
Are you saying an advisory council altogether, or individual student council? Because I know I'm pretty sure she meets with students at least twice a quarter.
I'm talking about all together, like
lunch.
students and staff, and not just teachers, but our paras, our bus drivers, anybody who is a stakeholder.
Okay.
You know, to help solve some of these huge issues that we have.
It would be different from the district, this district advisory council, separate from that, more of a stakeholder council.
And something that we could do dedicated, like once a month, you know. I'm pretty sure I can gather up enough folks to participate. I don't know, but.
Well, I mean, sorry, good.
Yeah, I'm done. Those are my two big things, you know, that I feel like we need to address.
Well, I was going to ask, because the council you're talking about, I mean, would what Sarah's talking about fit into that? Like, is it more of a adjusting a mandate of what we're doing, or what's the structure there?
The district, there's a district advisory, the DAC. It represents usually one SAC member from each school attend, and they break it up regionally. So maybe using that, but adjusting what information is shared with them, or sharing different information. Or you might want to do a smaller group. I think that's could be a larger group. I haven't been there in
I would think the goal would not be to share information. The goal would be to gather information.
Right.
Just what my goal would be.
When you
Yeah,
mentioned
sure.
that, and what I was trying to pull up, we talked about strategic plan. And I can tell you the strategic plan that got me involved was with Mrs. Leroy, which was, very in-depth document that didn't really, account for the population that I represented. And I see that we've changed, and I have our summary, but I've looked at other strategic plans around the state, and one that really impressed me was Miami-Dade, who does pillars in their strategic plan with priorities inside each pillar. And if you go to, I tried to print it, but it's not PDF friendly. If you go to Miami-Dade's strategic plan, pillar number 4, the entire pillar is informed, engage, and empower stakeholders. And the priorities are to sustain strong lines of communication with students, families, employees, to strengthen awareness of district initiatives, activities, and programs, to enhance parent engagement, access, and advocacy, and number 4 is build, strengthen, and sustain relationships with stakeholders. We are missing this entire piece in our strategic plan, and I think if we update, because I was told in my advocacy days that our strategic plan is a fluid document that can be changed at any time. So when we approach that again to talk about enhancing it, we really need to take into account this kind of benchmark for our district, because it will answer a lot of that. It will lay the foundation for that.
The Florida School Board Association's training that I mentioned earlier today in the work session about staying in your lane, that training.
That was your favorite, stay in your lane.
Yeah. Well, I went to a presentation from, I believe it was Hernando County, or Pasco, and they have a citizens academy, if you will, where they take volunteers from the community and they visit schools. I can look back on my notes to get the exact, but I think that falls under.
Stakeholders, yeah.
It does, yeah.
I just sent today, Orange County did a presentation probably 2 or 3 months ago at Central Florida School Board Coalition meeting. They have Leadership Orange, which is very similar to how we do Leadership Winter Haven or Leadership Lakeland or Leadership Polk, but it's only for the school district. In Orange, Seminole has one too. There's a couple other, I think Hernando's basically the same thing you're talking about. In Orange County, they get to actually drive a bus during their training, during their Leadership Orange, but they had people come and speak and kind of give their testimonies of how eye-opening it was to go see their fleet of buses and to go to just to go to different places. That I sent it to Rachel and Mr. Hill and Jackie this morning. It's
So
something that
is
I
that
really
just like
think we should do.
Here we do like a 1 day, and this was an entire.
This is it's set up almost identical to how Leadership Polk or Leadership Winter Haven is, where theirs I think only goes until it's like 8 a.m. to 3 o'clock because there's not much as far as going to schools and things after 3 o'clock. Kids are gone. So it's getting to see those things. But theirs, and I can have Susan send the presentation out to everyone.
And it's free, and they got community partners to do like the lunches or the culinary.
I think Orange County, theirs is a $30 application fee, and they use that to kind of printing things and to offset the cost of transportation.
Is it a 1 day thing, or is it
This
like an
is, they
ongoing?
meet once a month
Once a month,
for
okay.
the, starting in August, going through
Just
May.
like
So they graduate in May, just like.
It's almost like a leadership development kind of.
And it's the morning, they normally do it's more so presentations, they'll have the budget chair come in and present, those type of people come in and present, and then they have lunch and go and do some sort of activity. They have a mock calendar committee where they actually have to come up with the school calendar. They have a budget session where they have to, these are where your envelopes are and how are you gonna pay for all of this? And I think all of the people that came and spoke to us that had gone through it said how eye-opening it was, that they had never been put in the situation to do any of those jobs. That the one guy seems like, our budget guy has the hardest job in the world, and I had no idea. I run a small company, I do a budget, but he's doing crazy things,
Is
Well,
it,
the
how
other
he
way,
does it.
the other thing that it was, it kind of promotes the positive things that are going on in our classrooms and in our schools.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of where
And that's
we
what
kinda
they said,
lack
they
sometimes.
they don't take Harrison's wonderful, but they don't take them to Harrison or Lawton
Right.
Child, they take them to Garner and to our
Exactly.
schools that need the most help and see the incredible things that they're doing,
Mhm.
even in those
And the folks
areas.
going through the program are community members, they're not,
They're they have to live in, for Orange County, they have to live in Orange County. But they said eventually they may expand it to, if you live in Osceola but you work in Orange County, but as of right now, they have to live in Orange County. And it's community members, it's parents, it's legislators, it's
Is that,
anybody that has an interest in the school system, and
is it run by staff, like
it's
staff?
run by their community relations department. It was the guy, their community relations person came and presented it, and he said that it was probably one of the best things that they had done for community relations, because now on their Facebook, when people are attacking different things, you have 30 community members from every session that are
There you go.
jumping on and saying, whoa,
Well,
this is why they're doing this, that are
Because they're
defending the
educated.
district, because they get it now.
Right, and I like the kind of, experiential aspects of it, rather than just telling them, like, here's the issues we face, here's the challenges, here's how you have to adjust things, to get a taste of other stuff.
And they had, I believe they said they had 100 apply this last year, they've limited it to 40, I think, just because that way they can fit them on
The-
one school
The
bus when they go
schedule,
places.
the schedule deterred some folks because the presentation I saw, they had to commit, like they could not miss,
Right,
you know.
and I think most of, because or at least for Orange County, their goal was not to target the teachers and the internal stakeholders,
Mhm.
it was to target
Right.
the people on the outside, all of the community partners.
There you go.
I mean, running that thing is gonna eat up at least one person per year, though, probably, so that's something we would need to.
And Linda Cobert in Orange County, she's the one who sent me the PowerPoint, she's been very helpful, and, if you want our template of, this is what we talk about every day, this is what
That'd be cool.
we do each session, we'd be happy to give it to you of, here's a blueprint of how we did it, there's no need to reinvent the wheel if we already have something.
very good. Ms. Miller, did you find your,
Yeah, that was that one thing I was looking at, but the other thing that I sent to Susan to send out, if you don't already follow the legislative tracker, which you can do from this House site at the Florida State House Representative site or the Senate site, yesterday I got notification of what was presented today, and it's the Senate Education Committee that met today, the school safety and security update. And that's it has a lot of great information that I think Susan's gonna send it out about where we are as a state. And Polk is listed, as far as dollars awarded in per school, but like an oversight of where we are with that, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Safety Act. So it's a PowerPoint, so hopefully Susan can, forward that out for people just to get an idea of where we are compared to others in the state and what other people are doing. But the main thing was that Miami-Dade, we have to address, if you look around the state, other strategic plans are more expansive. I'm proud of the school grades and we've raised it and we're a B district. But we have to talk about the whole child and the family, and the other strategic plans are great examples of the communication piece that I think that we're missing. So that was the biggest thing I had for this evening.
and
Social work.
Ms. Reynolds, did you have anything you
Leadership
specifically-
or Orange was actually what was on my list to talk about.
Okay.
But I looked at I think Billy had them send out strategic plans for several districts. The one thing that concerned me with several of them is that they weren't measurable goals, that I do wanna make sure that at least our not necessarily the priority, the top goal, but the objectives have some sort of measurement. I don't think any of us are gonna be upset if we say the goal's 80% and we get to 79% for something, but at least to have, what is increase substantially, what does that mean? To have those short-term goals, if we wanna increase it by 3 points or we wanna increase graduation rate, for example, to 85% versus we wanna increase it substantially. Would be my one thing on the strategic plan.
Well, can I pick up on that? Okay, so, yeah, I mean, one of the things to pick up on, just to address your point real quick, Sarah Beth, I mean, one of our current goals under our long range, a district goal is Polk County will improve training for principals and assistant principals. That is not a measurable goal.
Right, that's what I think all of
Right.
our targets underneath, how are we going to do that?
Right, and so, I mean, I think one of the things I find, and I think Lisa's point with Miami Dade is good. I think it's even more pronounced in the Osceola County one, because it's right out there in front. Is they have 5 sort of areas of emphasis that are an ongoing thing. And like an example of this here, we don't evaluate the quality of our implementation of programs here. Like focus as a thing, whether it's good or bad, like that probably should be a thing where evaluating whether that was a successful implementation or not. We're not doing that. You know, I've talked a lot about HR. I know Lynn. I mean, I think there's been some reforms put together in HR, but I haven't seen those things explained, and that's because nowhere on this list is work environment / you know, the concepts here are so narrowly focused on numbers that we lose broader things of experience in the district, and the things we all hear all the time, we're not evaluating the solutions for. I mean, we'll hear people say, I've got this experience and this experience and this experience and this experience, and we all want it to change, but it doesn't flow up into any goal. And so, you know, we could talk about, you know, so what I would like us to see, and this is not the place to hash all of this out. What I really want to make clear for me is I don't want a report in March about how we did on these goals. I want us to structure. I mean, because you and I really haven't had a chance to weigh in meaningfully on goals yet. I want us to think how we want to structure this page, and you know, my preliminary change in this would be, you know, instead of goal 1, you'd have priority 1, which would be academic success, right? And then you could have some measurable goals that flow up into that. Number 2 would be operational excellence, in which we hold people accountable for how programs are managed. You know, like board docs. We've spent $30,000 on a program and no one uses. That should be evaluated. And you know, that's harmful. That's harmful to the morale for folks here. That kind of thing is not being evaluated by us at all. And I think we need to build that. I think senior leadership needs to know we care about that in ways that focus them on how those things are experienced on the ground, not just do you get the points on the school's grading system. And I think a lot of these things are measurable in the yes or no sense. In HR, did you put this policy in place? Did you put this policy in place? What have you done to make sure that we're protecting whistleblowers in a meaningful way, or you know, protecting against retaliation? You know, those types of things are measurable in a different way than counting the number. So I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I think we need to have a good discussion about that and agree on what we all want to do as a board, because we have a very different board now than we did for, you know, a radically different board than we had 2.5 years ago, and a very different one than we did 2 months ago. So, you know, I think it's time to really see where we want to go from here. Now you can blah me. Lisa, I'm sorry.
Just to clarify, I didn't mean for the overarching goal. I meant more for the objectives underneath that,
Okay, yeah.
to make sure that they're directing which way we're going in the overarching goal, that it's not,
So,
We're
so
gonna
the
do
word you're looking for maybe is accountability on,
But the 85% of the function of the organization, I would say, is not evaluated in any meaningful way. We're not evaluating people on access to ESE services. We're not evaluating quality of implementation, and it matters. I mean, yeah. Well, it's. I mean, we have accountability. It's just kind of narrowly focused. I want it to be much broader across the entire organization. I mean, it sounds silly, but I want us to run it like a business. People say that all the time, but you know, I'm the supposed left winger here. You know, I want us to pay attention to the work in environment in a serious way. I want us to not say Polk County will improve training for principals and assistant principals. I want us to document how we're going to do that. What are our plans for making our training better? What is our plans for improving the quality of our leadership? And some of these things will be necessarily qualitative. You know, we're just going to have to make judgments about them. But at least we can get them down on paper and prioritize them as things that are important. Yeah.
Yeah, so, part of the challenge you have with strategic planning is trying to stay out of the weeds as much as possible, because ultimately, you know, I think it's responsible to the board to identify the overarching objective, whatever you want to call them, and then we have a CEO who then we ask to meet those goals. And I've heard two things here I think are quite relevant. One is including some sort of stakeholder programs. Lisa talked about this. And the second is evaluating programs. I think those are certainly relevant things that we would want to discuss as part of our strategic plan. I would offer this. Bear in mind that once a strategic plan is in place, you have folks throughout the organization who have long-range goals in meeting those strategies, whatever they are. And it can be rather disruptive to an organization to just kind of tear that apart. So we probably want to keep that in mind too as we think about this. I would offer it to the extent that we can work with this and repair it and build it. I think that's probably going to be a better long-term approach than just completely tearing it apart.
Agreed. I think most of this stuff can stay. It needs to be sort of reorganized. Like, I mean, what I really want, I mean, just for me, is something that looks like pillars, or something that looks like Osceola's big, like 5 or 6 concepts. And then most of these things flow up into one of those. Yeah. You know, and then I also want to. I mean, we're already doing a lot of these things. I mean, Tetra has told us several times about things that are happening in HR, but I don't really know what. We've never really seen a clear presentation of what those are. I mean, I have a lot of concerns about the way, as you all know, about the way things happen. I need to see improvement in that. I need to see that evaluated. Like from, as you know, we'll see if there are 4 board members for that. But a lot of this stuff I think you're already doing. John's got a committee that he's working on that's going to be very, very important. We should just be monitoring. That should, the results from that should flow up into what the strategic plan reflects. The strategic plan right now is primarily about counting some wins. I want it to be about holding the entire organization accountable holistically and fairly. I mean, a lot of the things I'm suggesting won't be hard to execute. I mean, it's not like we're asking the impossible here. So.
And you know, when I first, as a community member, asked about the strategic plan, I was told it's a fluid document that's easy to change. So what you're saying is completely different than the board's response at the time.
Strategic plans aren't easy to change, nor should they be, because what's happened is
because you have to be able to measure. Right.
Yeah, well, the organization has adopted that, and now you've got folks who are working towards that. They've implemented programs and bought programs, and so that's why we meet twice a year to talk about it, as opposed to changing it in midstream. And certainly, we have a meeting coming up in March. We have a strategic planning meeting coming up in March. And certainly, I would agree. I listened to what you said. I concur with that completely. I think there should be some component of the strategic plan that includes the community, that includes our teachers.
But even the succession plan that we talked about earlier,
Right.
we do not have that across this district, and I heard that multiple times, not just from the auditing department, but from from other departments when I met with them. You know, if someone leaves, if someone retires, if someone passes away, what was happening with them stops. That we haven't created that kind of, and that could be added to the strategic plan we have, that, to be able to measure that. We have got to build that, or we are not, or our progress is gonna be so slow, because the new people are having to relearn from the beginning. And so, and I think we've done it over the years, but it's never been, I guess, in written form or in policy, because it's not been consistent.
Couldn't that be interwoven with the accountability piece as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think, I mean, I could do some editing to this, and I think it's, we don't have to tear it apart. It's formalize oversight of some of the initiatives that are going on, and say that are already going on, that we care about the outcomes of them and want to know what's going on, and then have, like, at the top of each of these goals, a concept, you know, like, I mean, I do think, personally, 1, 2, and 3 could probably all flow up into academic success. I mean, that's, you know, I think, just speaking as one board member, I want a much broader, organizationally focused strategic plan that builds on what we already have and kind of formalizes oversight of things that are already going on in theory. And I don't think it'll be that. I don't think it'll be just.
One of the things that I've heard, and I know that, you know, I'm sure that we've all heard this, is that we implement a program,
Right.
and then we ask our teachers to get involved with that program, and then we change that program, right? And we're not sure whether it was successful or not. Why are we changing it? Because somebody comes along and feels like there's a better program, right? So I do agree that we need to have some sort of approach to determining whether those programs are working, and if the teachers like them, and what programs they might believe are best for our district. I think they should certainly have input into that. So working those things in, I think, is a very good idea.
I just think, to Billy's point, most of the other districts' strategic plans are not this formal, and every goal is at least 4 to 5 lines. Most of them look more like Osceola's, where they have, one is academic success, and then it has a goal statement that's 8 words that kind of is the overarching, and then it goes into the weeds a little bit more in the bottom. I loved their first page. It was the second page where there was ensure high levels of learning for all students in literacy. What does that mean?
Right.
And what is a high level? What does that mean? Was where my concern was, that a lot of them didn't have a this is how we're going to
Sounds
do it
more
in
like
their
a mission
strategies.
statement.
It was just this is what we want to do. So the goal I feel like should be, this is what we want to do, and then the strategy should be, this is how we're going to do it.
Right. I mean, I can assure you that I'm not going to assign on to any garbage, vague goal.
No,
Like,
that
no,
was-
I want to. We'll figure out. I mean, some of these things may have to be qualitatively assessed. I mean, we can make judgments,
absolutely.
but you
Just
know,
there's, like on Osceola's, there's not a single quantitative anything. It just, everything's either increase or, but I
Right.
feel like having a goal of, this is how much we want to increase, or this is just,
well, I think the larger discussion we have to have at some point is the sometime conflict between specificity of number and reality of experience on the
But
ground.
even-
So say we set a goal to reduce referrals by half. The easiest way to do that is tell people stop writing referrals,
right,
and that happens all the time. And that's what happens when you measure, and we need to be honest about that.
Right.
So, like, we need to think about goals that reconcile counting with experience. And I can promise you, I'll be rigorous in that. I'm with you. I want rigorous goals that reconcile experience and counting. I don't want to see will improve training for principals and assistant principals. We might as well scratch that. That's not helping anything. What do we do to you know, So anyway, but that's, I think that's a more, that's a deeper philosophical conversation that we should probably have next month or something, you know.
Okay,
I have two other things.
okay.
One of them was a Wes question, that was just messaged to me because the person had a flat tire and could not get here. The advisory, the Polk County ESC advisory is being they're reorganizing. They're creating bylaws again. They're going to invite community members. Their request is to be a committee under the boards and committees. And what is the process of that?
The board can establish any sort of committee that it wishes. I think typically the board would take an action to establish that. And you can look at examples in other districts, if there are similar boards and committees, for how they should be structured.
Okay.
But yes, typically the board, if there are committees that report to the board establishes those.
Are the bylaws then given, is that something you confer with, or is that something they do on their own with the committee of community members?
Well, if it
and
doesn't
stuff?
involve personnel, we could make that decision.
Yes, typically,
Okay.
yeah, they can propose, they would propose their bylaws. You would determine whether or not they were acceptable.
Okay, that was one question. And the other question that we had for today, or because we have audience members that I know want to give input, but we have to talk about communication as a board, referring to board communications with district personnel and or staff. We have a policy that's created with the preferred method of communication, which is very similar to across the state. We have an understanding, depending on what I have here from different teachers, it's depending on what school you're at, it's been explained or implemented in several ways, and some of it is very fear-based and retribution-based, if they're talking to board members. And I, as a board member, do not want that. Previous board members over the last 20 years did not have that. There was a great communication, professionalism between the board, not going out of their bounds and staying in their lane. But for simple communication between a board member and a district employee, they were able to do that freely. And so it's probably a long conversation, but I think the board needs to really address that sooner than later, about what that looks like, either with policy or with defining what our policy is. Because my history, talking to other board members, being a community member that was easily conversing with the board, being a teacher at one time and conversing with board members when I, had a great idea or wanted to say something was working, or if I wanted to say something wasn't working, we need to work on how we communicate that to the public and to our staff.
Joe, would you be interested in weighing in on that?
I think communication, I would agree communication is something you're always going to be working at in an organization, in any organization, certainly in our organization, to improve. And I think it's something that has been brought up a number of times. I know Mr. Townsend's brought it up as well. And so I think sharing those ideas and those pieces that you feel like can enhance that and bringing those to the superintendent is something she would certainly embrace and be interested in looking at.
Good, sir.
Yeah, I think it trickles down to the word micromanage. That's what I think the teachers kind of feel like they're micromanaged, even in who they can talk to and what they can say, and sometimes the response is, well, that's what the district tells us. It just feels like it's
Right.
You're now micromanaging
Okay.
conversations, is what it kind of feels
And I
like.
can assure you that certainly would not be the intent. So if that is the perception and that's occurring, then obviously communicating the intent in a more clear fashion. I think we all understand that a free flow of positive communication is important for exchanging ideas and for a variety of levels. Also, in any organization, you also have for the efficiency of the organization, you have a chain of command, so to speak, where you go through the appropriate channels to get the information you need, and it's about serving and about making things efficient. So I think if it's being perceived and there's perceptions, that's certainly something that.
And that's where I think if we had a committee of teachers who could relay, you know, because we've heard everything from, you know, serious accusations of, you know, just because I talked to you, I was, you know, warned or I was told, and I don't, a company doesn't operate that way. You know, I think we need to work on that perception of how we want our communication from our staff. We want to hear what's working. We want to hear what you're challenged with. We want to create solutions. We will recognize the self-critical stuff we need to start doing a better job at. And it's not criticizing persons or individual programs, but we have to be, you know, I don't know if not self-critical or just you know, weighing in on what we're doing here to make sure that it's the best for all staff. So that's something we can talk at, because we have a policy. Maybe we need to look at it, or we, you know, or at least define it. I don't know.
I mean, it's, sorry, go ahead. That's good.
I've not seen that. Have you seen the policy? Can you?
Well, the policy that the superintendent
Right.
forwarded that said the preferred method of all communication to board members is through the superintendent's office.
Oh, my take on that is if you have questions of her staff as opposed to having a teacher come to you and offer comments to you.
That
No?
may not have been how it got trickled down from administrations across the county.
No, yeah,
Well,
they're, yeah.
Unfortunately.
I think, and
Yeah.
then again, I think there's obviously there's
Yeah, that was not intent. That was not the
Yeah.
intent. I had the private meeting. That was not the superintendent's intent. But you're right. There were several occasions where staff reached out. I don't know that I can even speak to you. And I thought, well, that's not how that was, you know. So we probably need to define it and soften that so our staff understands that, yes, please reach out with your either, you know, praising of something that we're doing so we can keep doing it, or maybe correcting something that you think could be done better. Either way, we need to hear from them.
And just to John's point, I mean, I think more important than positive communication is honest communication.
I agree.
And I think what you mean by positive
I would
is
include that. Yes.
constructive.
Yeah, constructive.
Right.
And
Right.
communication, receiving all forms, the good,
Right.
the bad. What I
Right.
typically
Right.
call it when my staff in the day was, we need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's how we improve and address issues and concerns.
I just think, you know, this is a big organization. It is, I think, really inefficient to run every question we have. I mean, I'm doing it. I'm copying the superintendent on everything I ask. But she's got a lot to do during the day. I think we can get over a lot of this through trust and common purpose. And to me, it seems like a very simple rule, is that if there is any staff member from you, John, to the janitor, you know, who feels in any way uncomfortable by anything they're asked, they never have to answer us. Like, they say, you know what, I just don't want to answer you that. I would prefer you talk to the supervisor. That's an acceptable answer at all times. I mean, outside, if we threw the policy away, you know, like, and then the second part of that is tell them, look, I'm really busy doing something important right now. Can I get to that sometime down the road? That's also an acceptable answer. I want you doing your job. If I think the superintendent could trust her staff a bit more than she does to engage with us in constructive ways, and for simple questions. I mean, like, somebody emailed me last night wanting the exact year date that the high school was going to open in Northeast Polk. And I had to copy 3 people on that because I wanted to make sure everybody knew I'd been asked, and you know, so I copied Jackie, I copied and Angela. It seems like I copied somebody else for a very simple question that could have been easily addressed through one person.
And we don't want to bog. I personally
Yeah,
do not. I feel like I
I-
bog Joanne down. I bog the superintendent down. She does a phenomenal job of being in the community and making those connections for something, you know, that might take me 6 days to get a response from her office when I could get a 2-second phone call. Can you forward that email? I really could need that information. Can you forward it? Sure, no problem. It takes me 6 days to get a response from the superintendent's office. And so it's not effective. So, and I think that, you know, just common courtesy and professionalism. I don't know that you can write policies on how to, do
Right,
that, but I
right.
think that's what we need to work on as a group.
Yeah. I mean, I do think the core of any policy has to protect staff from us. And, I mean, start with that. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like you're being pressured, if you feel like you're being put in a bad spot, you don't have to answer us. I mean, does anybody disagree with that? If we were ever to do that, I mean,
No,
Yeah.
I would never want
again,
information.
I'm assuming we changed. This
Perfect.
is
I have a perfect example. I met all the heads of the departments. I wanted to meet with the regional superintendents.
Right.
We asked. One of them said, I need to ask the superintendent. Totally fine. You need to ask the superintendent. What would make you comfortable? Let's meet as a group. That was something that there was never pressure. I can tell you, there's no, the fact that a board member calls, nobody's jumping to do anything that we call for. That's not there. The perception that people are going to drop their work to perform, I haven't felt that. So, and I would never want to, put that on someone else. I think people understand, that we need information because we are the connection to the community. This is what they wanted. They wanted a board who understood what was happening and wanted to be a part of what was happening.
Right.
And they clearly made that clear with over 60% of the vote in that Fortney race that they wanted somebody engaged. And so we need to do that, but we need to lay out how it's done to respect the office of the superintendent and her time. And that's what I hope to do.
So let me make sure I'm understanding everybody. I'm asking for a consensus on this. We're good if, and I'm happy to take this to the superintendent and see how she feels about it. We're good with somebody telling us, I don't feel comfortable answering that
Absolutely.
question. Are we okay with that?
absolutely.
Okay. Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if every answer we get is I don't feel comfortable answering, I don't feel comfortable. If there's a perception that the word goes down just to say I don't feel comfortable, so that we're right back where we started from, then maybe we'll assess that. But I think as long as common sense holds, then yeah. I mean, it's.
It will be a shift in how we operate, so it's going to be a while before I
Right.
see
Right.
that changing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would take some burden off her, off Joanne, off if we have basic little answers, we need to that Jason Pitts can give to us in 30 seconds. Why do we got to go through it's just simple. I mean, that's my feeling. Just don't make it harder than it has to be.
And I think still probably copying the superintendent just so she knows what's being asked. Obviously if 3 board members have all asked the same question, okay, this
Right.
is something I need to probably know what staff is saying so that if somebody asks me in the public, I know what's going on and I don't look uneducated about it, but just so that she can see that it was responded to, it was.
Well, but I think there is also a common sense element to that. There's a thing between asking, hey, what's the year it's supposed to open, versus, hey, can you tell me what the median salaries are for our people? But those kind of 2 different levels of answer. I mean, I would hope that we could kind of do the easy stuff without having to bother her. But you're right. I mean, if it's something everybody's asking about.
If somebody asks a question to my staff, I'd like to know about it simply because I'm probably somebody's gonna talk to me about that later and say, hey, by the way, I asked this question, here's the answer. I wanna know about that because I may want to elaborate on it, or I don't want it to seem like I'm not on top of what's happening. So I think that's important that the superintendent knows when and there is a level of.
But you don't have 15,000 employees.
That's right, you're right.
I mean,
But I have
I hear you.
15,000 people who are writing letters to my 5 employees. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, one thing you may want to consider in the conversation is I suspect that if you spoke with Andrea Messina or Bill Montfort, that they would agree that the number one place where board members' elbows rub up against superintendent's elbows is in the area of directing staff. It's probably the HR function, and it's really a question of dynamics and from whose viewpoint you're looking at it. But when you say I need information, sometimes members of the staff perceive that as get me information, which is where that comes in. So in your conversation, I just suggest you might want to think about that contextually as you approach that. But that's the number one place where friction occurs, I think.
And I think sometimes when a board member says, I need information, what they hear is, I want you to act on this,
Yes.
right? They hear that a lot too. We probably don't realize that, but there's a perception that they should do something.
Farm
More
boy,
than just
fetch me
write.
that picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Would it be possible to do this, please? Is generally what I actually say.
I've never had anybody around, and Wes has been here a long time, and I've talked to board members 20 years ago that this was not an issue. This is how they did business. Something simple as forward an email, or can you tell me around the date that might open? Thanks so much. Like, this has not been, I don't know when it shifted.
Yeah, it has varied from superintendent to
Okay.
superintendent, and the dynamics between the superintendent and the board. You would see it in much more distinctly in a district that had an
An
elected
elected,
superintendent.
right.
Correct.
But when you read the statutes, the powers and duties of the superintendent, powers and duties of the school board do not differ between an elected district and an appointed
But
district.
the current, what you're hearing about everything, right, that's a very an elected superintendent kind of leadership kind of role.
But it does bleed over, and I think it does. Just anecdotally, my observation would be that it varied from superintendent to superintendent. And frankly, from time to time, when you had a board member or members who placed great demands on the staff,
Right,
which has happened in the past.
we'd have to have that understanding.
Well, it's a well.
But that was the only two things I had. So if the, any committee forms and wants to be part of boards, because I think this question comes from adding community members that want to be involved in something. They usually want to be involved in something that's legitimized, actually, like with the city of Lakeland, if it's under a boarding committee, not just a group of people that want to get together and give you some advice. So I will let them know that that's a board decision and that can go onto an agenda if that's so approved or whatever. And then this other thing we can continue the conversation on. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your input.
Well, and just some kudos along those lines. I mean, getting the meetings online, I think has been a big improvement in
Sorry,
what people see, and I think we should probably expand to the entire meeting, but we can get to that at a different time.
What about live streaming? If we can live stream
Don't
Teacher of
we?
the Year, if we can live stream graduation, why aren't we live streaming these?
Do we not live stream? Okay.
They're put on afterwards too with the
Clips, like with the
with the
editorial.
time marks of at
Yeah.
3 minutes and 33
Yeah,
seconds.
yeah,
That's when this
yeah.
starts.
Yeah, I mean, I that would certainly support live streaming. And I think ideally we would go ahead and add public comment in as well. I mean, it's been a pretty important part of a number of meetings, even when it's not pleasant for some of us. You know, it's part of the reality of governing. You know, and the public needs to judge some of those things for themselves if they can't be here to see them. So I would say, good job on getting the meetings out there. Let's go ahead and take the next step if we can. And that sort of fits into the communication.
So my primary initiative this year is, as you might imagine, is related to finance. It stuns me that over the past 10 years or so, we've seen our annual revenues cut by over $110 million in different areas and different ways. I was really, it frustrates me to hear that we spend $35 million a year and the state pays for $25 million a year for busing.
That was something.
And the mileage that we drive simply because of state initiatives instead of focusing on the real core issue of how do we make our schools better. So, you know, as you know, as you've been on the board a few years now, we meet with our legislators, we talk to them. I think we need power brokers at the table. And so what I've talked to Commissioner George Lindsay about this, and I've talked to the superintendent about it, and what we've talked about is establishing a blue ribbon panel of some of the most influential people in Polk County to serve on this panel and give them access to the school district and what we're doing. So that I think it does the same thing we talk about with the parents and and the students and the teachers who are on these panels, and they look inside the district, just,
It's a bit like Sarah Beth's saying. Yeah.
exactly, they get a look into the district, and then they can sit down with those folks. They're much more powerful advocates and say, look, folks, you don't understand. This is not as it seems to you. You can't keep adding these mandates and expecting the school district to find the money to pay for them somewhere. If you're gonna add them, and we should, and many of them we know we should be adding, but you have to find a way to pay for them. It's just common sense. So anyway, that's my focus, and this year we're gonna be working on that, putting that together, getting those folks to the table, engaging them as advocates for the school district. And so that's probably gonna be my focus, and in addition to listening carefully to my colleagues and trying to make sure we're moving your agendas forward as well. So any other thoughts, comments as part of our roundtable? Yes, ma'am.
Can we add the creating a leadership bulk or something like that as a discussion topic at a work session?
Sure.
I just
You mean like the orange?
the
Yeah.
leadership orange
Absolutely.
or something of that nature?
Can you add that to the next work session agenda?
I just would love to get it started with the next school year, which would mean getting applications.
Now,
by summer.
that does entail some, it sounds like it's gonna entail some personnel resources, right? So we can certainly discuss it, but at some point in time, that'll be a
Yeah.
negotiation with the superintendent.
That's what I'd like to.
Maybe we can get a sponsor or something. Yeah.
Well, that's what Hernando did. They had business sponsors for the whole thing.
Our academy
Yeah.
board should be approached for that.
Yeah, they have the academy, one of their culinary academy, they basically end up with lunch at a culinary academy for
Mhm.
most of their days, so that it's
But even
showcasing
like the
what their kids are
transportation
cooking.
and was all paid for by community.
I guess we should probably talk for a second about the future of these meetings a little bit, and just to kind of give you an idea of the kind of thing I'd like to see in the future. Like, there's a physics professor at FSU who writes, well, his name is Paul Cottle. He's really he does a tremendous advocate for science education, meaningful science education. The kids are very underprepared. The kids he sees are, he has a real sense of what we need to be doing, or what the state as a whole needs to be doing. I think his insights. So for what I would love to do is like bring him in, bring a couple of the math and science professors from Polk State, and maybe one of these meetings is about high level math and science education, and what we as a board need to know about what the universities are seeing, not just from our kids, but from kids in general. How can we prepare the kids better? Paul has this whole model called studio physics, where like I get the impression it's almost like teaching physics like teaching someone a guitar. It's very hands-on. It's very, and I just think he's a very insightful guy and is able to look beyond numbers to what the reality is. So maybe we have him here in April. Is that the kind of thing you guys would be amenable to for these meetings, like to bring in somebody from the outside and have that kind of discussion?
So I have two things. So you're talking more of an articulation type of, like, they're going to articulate to us what we need to be doing.
Well, it's more a chance for us to engage with them.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, we used to do articulation meetings like between 6th and 7th graders, and then 8th and 9th grade teachers. Like, what was the expectation at a high school level versus 8th? Are you talking about that type of articulation?
The thing I would say, don't get hung up on the specific topic that I'm talking about. I'm just giving that as an
Right,
example.
but I'm still using the word articulation, like an expectation.
What I'm saying is that for these meetings, this seems like about the only forum we would have to be able to hear a guy like that come in and talk to us about his right or what he's seeing, what students are coming to Florida State physics with struggles, and there was a very successful kid from Fort Meade who went up there. Maybe we get him and him together. Don't get too concerned about what the actual topic was. This is just an example. It could be some completely other topic about how to.
But it still would be articulation, like if we had your blue ribbon folks
Right.
come in, we would still be articulating.
Right. Our
And then the-
articulation in speaking
And
back
then
and
just
forth.
just to defend every science teacher in Polk County, you know, it's hard to do that when you're worried about a multiple guest test that, you know,
Well,
your
yeah,
school
and
group has.
I think he would.
Just saying.
I think you would find him to be great help in that debate. But the point being, are those the kind of things that we could discuss here? Like
Well-
have a single topic, have a guest visitor to interact with.
Yeah, I mean, we have a board meeting once a month, simply because what we found was that the one board meeting was sufficient to conduct official business. But I think we have the 2 work sessions, and certainly we can expand one of those work sessions. I think the bigger concern from my perspective is we clearly have folks here who want to talk to us, and I think that's good. I'm not sure how we work that in. We could, for example, earlier today we talked about, I mean, we could start at 9 and go pretty much all afternoon if we wanted to. The key, we have to balance that with staff. If we're having them at night, we have to balance that with staff and having staff here and so forth. So I know we talked maybe about what I think I heard earlier was maybe starting them at 4 or 5 and having them go a little bit longer into the evening. Is that what I heard that folks?
Like the public could come in for input, but start up the actual work session agenda earlier?
Yeah, and then
Then have
the
the
public
public.
could come in
Right.
at
So
6.
they're not sitting through things they may not be concerned about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what I'm hearing?
My only concern would be how, I mean, starting at 4, even starting at 1 or 2, with how long work sessions run, and keeping staff into the, I hate to keep.
I really think we should. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna put it out there that, you know, the majority of the folks that I know work well after paid hours, and, you know, I think there's comp time and all kinds of stuff that's afforded to the district staff. I don't know that for a fact, but I've heard of it, and, you know, I've even ran into somebody who was working from home one day, and, you know, I think I said it earlier, we have a lot of things that need to be fixed, and you know, it takes time, and I think everybody, if they're getting a paycheck, should be willing to invest that time, like most of our staffs at schools do.
Okay, so what we could do, clearly it's easy to start at 1 or 2 or whatever and have plenty of time for us to do the things that you're talking about and having these kinds of discussions. I guess my real concern is involving the community. Now, we do, of course, have opportunities for the community to speak at the board meetings. I think that my sense of this was it's a little more relaxed environment where folks are more likely to share their thoughts with us, and that's wonderful. But I think what we could do is try that, say we'll have an hour or 2 of community discussion. Is that what you had in mind?
Yes, because as I brought up our very first work session, being somebody who approached the board and watched everybody sit up there and stare at me was not inviting. And not even knowing that you were not allowed to even say something to me was even more of a shock. You know, and I think this setting, people might feel a little more at ease to, you know, share with us a concern that is, I'm sure, relevant, or they would not have made the trip down here on their own time.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
Well, and I just to kind of reiterate the point I was making, I think if instead of, you know, we sort of talked about our priorities, at some point in the future, instead of talking about our priorities, if our agenda item is to hear from physics professor at Florida State about his perceptions of science and math education in Florida and what he's doing and how it's been successful, blah, 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 blah. Is that a thing that we could agenda one of these meetings for and still talk? I mean, the public could sit there and listen to it, and then when so instead of having a general discussion, we have a focused one, or that's built around a specific issue. Like I hope we'll do that some. Like we'll have a meeting that's specifically about ESE some night, or we'll have a meeting that's specifically about, you know, some other. That's what I mean. I mean, look, I love to just blab, but you know, I think this also affords us the opportunity to hear from experts that aren't in our own organization, not necessarily. So and have the public hear about it too.
Okay. We agree with that?
My phone's blowing up because we put on social media about the transportation, without mentioning how many millions of dollars in the red is the reason why we're doing it. So can you please remind people, we are operating $12 million in the red in transportation. This is not, we're not doing this to people. We needed to give they need to understand why this is happening.
Yeah,
Right.
It already got put out there, like,
Yes.
from this afternoon?
Well, that's what my phone is saying.
Well, I mean, our work sessions are broadcast to
Yeah.
all the schools, as you know.
Yeah.
So.
But I think we need, this is an example of the community needs to know why things are happening. We're not doing
Right.
things to them.
Right.
It's happening because we're
Right.
$12 million in the red, just as we are now. We are trying to work with what we have. Nobody wants to make the decision, you know, to cut transportation to anyone. We haven't really made the final decision, I don't think so, on that 2 mile radius. Maybe we have, we didn't vote on it. But we need to give the why, so my phone, people understand.
Well, Lisa, if it's, you know, you have to repeat things 3 to 5 times. Well,
I think the last thing I said today was.
I'm just saying that people read and they get, and then they, you know.
I'm a single mother that works 12 hours a day, I have no way
I
to
know
transport
that.
my kid. You just told me you're not doing this, so I think the why would help solve it.
Yeah, I mean, and clearly, and just to be clear, what we said was we're moving forward with the charter schools.
Right.
We have not
Right.
made a decision yet, at least not as a board.
But
as
the only
relates-
information they would have gotten was from the
Right.
tape, so
Right.
that was all said.
Do
is my point.
do we have the power to tell the staff not to do it? I mean, I think that's actually an open question. I mean,
Not to do what?
if, like you just said, as a board, we have decided to move forward, do we actually have the power to say we're not gonna move forward? I mean, to me, that's some of the bigger issues that if you look at those powers, they're pretty, you know, that's for.
Well, I
I think they should add,
I
because
think-
we're 12 million in.
And this is my take on it, Mr. Bridges, please
But it
weigh in.
doesn't say what
As,
courtesy buses,
I've got it.
they just have to read all of it.
you know, I mean, state law's clear, the superintendent has authority for personnel matters. But I think as a board, if there's 7 of us who say, hey, here's what we're going to do, it's gonna be very difficult for her to
Right.
not follow suit on that, would you agree? So, I think that's, would be the way to address it. But, you know, we need to have some more conversations about that. I mean, Rob may come back with some very compelling evidence about what we can and can't do, or he may come back with a plan that we're agreeable to.
But Lisa's point about the why, it's the way we think about, it's part of the self-criticism thing is as well. Today was the first day I have ever heard us say, it's a $37 million job to transport the kids that we're transporting, and we're funded at $25 million. I mean, I'm a school board member, and who's talked a lot about transportation. It's the first time I've ever heard it framed that way. That frames everything.
Sure.
And that's the problem we start with. Like, rather than announcing what we're doing to people, we need to start with, here is the fundamental issue. And I think we do this a lot as an organization, which is why I'm circling back to the organizational question. What's the problem that we have to address structurally that causes us to do this thing that the public freaks out over because they don't? Like we start with the solution before we really examine the problem, and then we almost always end up backtracking from the solution because it meets the public. The public goes, ah, you know, like it's, and so that's just a conceptual thing.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
It's my take on it that the problem was that we are having trouble hiring bus drivers. And the real core issue is that we're having trouble getting students to school on time. But I don't think the general public, in my opinion, I don't think they really understand that fully completely. I think when you say when you don't have you know, when we're in the negative, that resonates much more so than saying, sorry,
Right.
we don't have the money to hire
Right.
bus drivers and get your students to class. We just don't have it, it's just not there. And I think that's what started the conversation, or started this initiative from Mr. Davis's perspective.
Well, the only information that would have caused your phone to blow up would have been the taped session of our work session today, correct?
There's also a post on Facebook, but the
Yeah.
post on
Okay.
Facebook says.
I'm looking at the
that-
ledger, they said they haven't run anything yet, so.
No, it's a post on our social media page.
Did we post it?
Yes.
We-
Yes.
Yeah, we
Okay,
posted
well,
it.
The post says that
That was
charter
my
school will be
original question.
eliminated and that we're still evaluating the 2-mile radius.
But we need to say, we're doing this because.
Right. We
So
need
that
to say every
post did
time,
not
it's
say
a, it's a
that,
$37
because the
million,
work session
it's
we
a
did say
$37
that.
million job to transport the kids we're transporting today, that we're funded at $25 million for. That $12 million is being taken right away from teacher salaries. It's being taken right away from, I mean, if that is in fact the case, I mean, we need to make sure that's true. But
It's money we don't have to pay bus drivers.
right, it's
Right.
money to pay bus drivers. That cost has a consequence, you know, and we don't start with that broad problem. We go to the thing that's guaranteed to put everybody into a meat grinder first.
I can't believe that already went out like that. Okay.
All right. So anyway,
Anything else?
Okay.
public.
Anything else on the roundtable? Okay, so at this time, we're gonna invite our public to come forward and speak, please. Just a couple of things I'd like to offer. We still have a policy that limits comments to 3 minutes, so please keep that in mind. This is a trial situation. We certainly appreciate you being here. And I say that from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it. But we still have some policy, and if we find that we want to expand this at some point in time, and we want to change that, we certainly can do that as well. We discourage board members from engaging in comment with the public simply because we don't want it to turn into, you know, a disrespectful situation for the board member or for the members of our public. So I would ask that we want to hear your concerns. We want to hear your challenges, the problems. We absolutely want to hear those. But I would ask you to be respectful and not direct them at individuals. You know, if you could stay focused on the issue, we appreciate that because it gives us something to work with. And more importantly, if you have some proposed solutions, we appreciate those as well. So please keep that in mind. We want to hear from you. We don't want this to turn into an argument or a disruptive session. So with that in mind, is there somebody who would like to come forward and offer some comments, please?
I have to go to another meeting, so I want to talk quick. If you don't
Okay.
mind. Do I need to come up here, or can I just sit here?
You can sit there.
Okay, great. I'm Michelle Montero. I'm a teacher here in Polk County. Several of you already know me. One thing I would ask at this forum, I was kind of expecting more of a public forum. If we're limited to 3 minutes, I would think, just a suggestion, maybe you guys could limit to maybe 10 minutes each, a little bit more time and not, you know, drag on for so long. Just a little suggestion about this. Something that I think is extremely important in the discussions you guys are saying here. I'm hearing a lot, and please, I'm not being disrespectful at all, but I'm hearing a lot of this. We need to cut to the chase. You guys need to get committees formed in each and every school in this district. Every school, every, you know, like a real academy where I am, something a little bit different, every little district, nook and cranny. You need to get a committee together of the kids. The kids need to be invested in this. They need to tell you how they need to learn, how the new ways of learning and how, you know, you can engage them. You need to get with your teachers. They need to be able to form 1 or 2 people from each school, and they need to be able to speak freely. And they need to come to meetings like this or school board meetings and tell you guys honestly and openly what is going on out there. It is out of control. It is ridiculous. And it needs to get under control. I think that solution would be, like I just said real quickly, little tiny committees at every single school where they can meet in private without the fear of a principal over their head, you know, or retaliation. And they need to form some ideas, solutions, and bring them maybe written down anonymously, even in a little sealed envelope, because that's how crazy it's gotten, how people feel, and bring it to you guys, let you know what's really going on out there. So,
And I just have a quick question. You said it's out of control. Could you help me understand that?
out of control in the sense that education in general in Polk County, it's not, I don't think personally, I'm a teacher, I don't want any, retaliation from this. I do not think we're a B school, a B county. We are not, in my opinion. I see it. I am a soldier on the front lines every single day. It's not happening. I teach the most at-risk students in this county. I do not even have a library. I do not even have library books to try to do, well, I take it back. I have 3 or 4 bins of AR books for my students who we've already gone through all of. I mean, I only have 3 minutes, so that's just a little tiny. I'm fighting an HR situation on my VAM scores. I teach the lowest of the low children who will not ever make more than a 1. I am punished for that. I have a VAM score, Mr. Hill, we've been battling this deal. I've spent 3 months trying to get the head of HR to give me a response. 3 months. I mean, I could go on. I could go on forever. It's out of control. 15-year veteran right here. I make under $50,000 a year. My insurance just went up. Trying to educate 2 children. I do it because it's my passion and I love it, but I'm about done. Okay? I'm going to go now. I've got to go to a city commissioner meeting. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for all you guys do.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else like to come forward and speak?
If nobody, I wanted to give them a chance first. You've said a lot today, and some of the frustration that you just heard is throughout the county. The fact is that problems go up, solutions don't come down. We have talked about workload, we have talked about autonomy, we have talked about student discipline, we've tried to address concerns at the bargaining table, and we get some movement, but not much. This county is very siloed now. Used to be that departments had a lot more communication with each other. I see it all the time where you talk to one person and they have to wait till they can talk to somebody else, and then you get a response. It's very slow. Every solution is very slow. I'm telling you, if we don't understand that we need to crank it up, we are losing teachers if we don't start to become more fleet of foot in finding solutions and letting those problems, letting solutions roll. I'm going to tell you, in some instances, it would be better to take a chance and find out that we didn't pick exactly the right solution, and we might have to change then to do nothing. And that's a problem. Even the fact of the hardened corners. I sent an email. I sent that email to you all. I asked that an immediate communication go out. An immediate communication. Not a communication when we've considered 3 weeks from now. An immediate communication go out to our employees, because they're afraid, they're frustrated, and they're stressed by this. They need to all understand what's happening. And this is a problem. We've talked about lesson plans and how do we change them. We had a whole committee and we thought we were coming to a solution. And under Kathy Lee Roy, we got to the end, and then she said, oh, we're not going to do that. But then we never picked it up and did anything else. Your teachers are stressed. Your support staff is stressed. Your students are stressed, and they're trying to tell you. Some of what you've talked about in terms of what we're going to need to do, we are going to need to organize, not just the union, but us as a district. We're going to need to organize to fight some of what's coming out of Tallahassee, ladies and gentlemen. We had a governor that gave an inaugural speech that did not mention public education at all. Mentioned charter, voucher expansion, choice expansion, but nothing about public schools when we're being starved to death. Do we sit by and allow ourselves to be starved to death, or do we fight back? These are things that your employees want to know. And the fear factor that several of you discussed is real. The fear factor is real, and I have people who are being mistreated that will not let me do anything about it because they're afraid it could get worse. I have people who feel like they cannot speak truth to power, and that does not help our system. It does not help our system at all when people cannot feel free to speak truth to power. Because really, most of the solutions, quite frankly, would be much better if they flowed up, not just down. Thank you.
No, thank you. As always, we appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am, please come.
I'm a parent of a child in the ESE department.
Could we have your name?
Patricia.
Patricia?
The problem I face as a parent within our administration at school is the lack of communication with our ESE families. I am part of the PTO and SAC committee. I am very involved in my son's education. The principal has given me such a hard time. I've tried to help other families. I've tried to build a community within our ESE family at school. I've always been sort of kind of denied. The vice principal has told me that she would rather cut the middleman out when it comes to giving out information to parents, which the middleman to her is the school, and families can get their information from the our annual thing that we're going to do this year, but we're not doing this year, the symposium. I've tried to give them solutions to some issues for our families, and it gets pushed back and pushed back. Issues with the LEA, communicating with families, getting back to them on time-sensitive evaluations. It's just not happening. I've emailed Dr. Steinke about these things because she wanted to know about LEA issues. So she's aware of those things. I've unfortunately had to have an advocate come to some of my IEP meetings or case conferences because it's just gotten that bad. And I've tried to work with them. I've been understanding with them. I understand the workload. But because I don't think they have a connection with somebody in the special needs world, they just kind of brush it off. So definitely retraining for principals, LEAs, certain things they need to get to parents, resources. I've done my resource booth at open house. Anything that I can do, I try and get it done. And I've talked to Dr. Steinke about having our school, it's a hub school, it's a big population of ESE students. If we could kind of make an example of our school, and again, I get nothing. But I'm willing to put in the work in, and I've let the principal know, I've let district personnel know. I will do what I can. I help parents on my days off, find solutions to certain issues that they're having. Just to have a parent liaison with our incoming families, I don't feel like our school's a family. That we are welcoming, incoming ESE families that are terrified because they don't know what an IEP meeting is. It's extremely scary. So I've been at it for a little while now. My son is 7. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts and for coming and sharing this with us today. Appreciate it very much. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Sure.
My name is Holly Rayburn, and I'm a teacher, and I'm also a parent. After looking at Senate Bill 1108, I learned that the law requires every 3 years each school district and school must complete a BPI assessment. After contacting 3 schools, 2 out of the 3 didn't know what a BPI assessment was. And I was wondering, what would the school board do to ensure that these Senate bills are being communicated to the schools? And then who's responsible for holding schools accountable for implementation?
Do you want me to tell you what a BPI assessment is?
It's a very complex deal, I think.
Do you know what a BPI assessment is, Mr. Hill? Do you?
I've heard of it, but I haven't had any extensive training on that.
Okay, each school is required to have one, and it's relatively new. We have, trainings for them. Fiddlers was helping do that. Everyone's supposed to be trained. I should be able to go to a school and ask for their BPI, but, best practices for inclusion is what BPI
Okay.
assessment
I
is.
know,
Best practice for inclusive education. It's usually facilitated by the Florida Inclusion Network. It was done kind of that legislative swing to make us take action. But Deputy Superintendent, I suggest, if you take a sampling of just any school, and the teachers might not know, but the administration, your APs and principals, and they probably don't. So
Well,
when we
yeah,
start talking about
right.
academies and ESC boot camps for principals who have not been given the tools, so I'm not judging them independently.
right,
This is legislation.
Right.
This isn't a suggestion.
right. Got it, thank you.
1169,
1108.
1108.
So you're talking 4 years
Yeah,
ago,
yours
1108
is
was,
2013.
That
Oh.
was 1,000 of them, so,
so now we're into
Yeah.
that long ago.
yeah.
Okay.
It was part of
So when you.
Andy
get-
Gardner, it was
Yeah.
part of his rule in the state senate.
So yeah, you can understand, once you get the acronym out there, then you understand what you're talking about.
But our administrators
we-
should know, we
but
shouldn't
we
have a
need-
parent go to a
We-
school
we
and them
need-
not know.
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Townsend?
Oh,
Duly noted.
does anybody else want to speak up? 'Cause, I'm sorry. Well, I'll just say, the things we've heard, we've got ESE access and understanding, communication, the stuff that Ariane talked about. To me, this ties back to the strategic plan question, because we're not really evaluating any of that stuff. We're not evaluating the experience, we're evaluating the number. And whether Michelle is right or not, that if you guys know how I feel about school grades. We'll get to that at a different time. But we need to reconcile the numbers with the experience. And I think our current way of evaluating what we do doesn't do that. And that's why I'm gonna be hitting, that's why I'm talking about the stuff I'm talking about. Because the stuff, transportation this morning, all the stuff we hear about, the stuff that people really seem to care about in their lives, we don't really address. We address it on a piecemeal basis, but we're not building that into how we year to year to year to year ratchet. These are not quick overnight.
Very complex.
This is ongoing
And
prioritization,
Constant.
trial and error, but until we prioritize them in a way that's tied to compensation, I guess, tied to job performance, it's easy to let those things be less important than raising the grade, and I think those things have to be equally important, and so that's the point I want.
Ms. Forney, did you have a comment?
No, you did.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that forward, Ms. Rayburn. We appreciate it, and it's duly noted, and we're gonna look into that.
yeah, best practices, inclusion, education, absolutely.
I can tell you that one time we suggested a summer camp for principals. It's not the teachers, because they get a lot of it already. The breakdown is with the admin, who just have not been exposed and given the tools. And this is an example.
Thank you.
Or they have 700
Yeah.
other things they have to
It's very complex, a lot of different
juggle as well.
To juggle, and I think what resonated with me when you're talking about that is prioritize. We have to figure out how to prioritize these things. So. Anyone else like to offer some comments? Yes.
I'm Sandy Doyle, I teach elementary PE school. And my issue is, I have a 45-to-1 student-teacher ratio. K through 2 is 18-to-1 in the classroom. 3 through 5 is 22-to-1. And beyond that, I believe it's 25-to-1. But when I get them, it's 45-to-1. And I have the same mandates everybody else has as far as teaching my curriculum and doing an SAO and everything else. And it would be very helpful, and I'm probably very expensive, to lower that ratio. But I would appreciate some help in that area.
Is that specific to PE? Is that is there a ratio that's
Yes.
different?
It is.
where they put them when there's no other place to put them.
Well, but what should the ratio be?
I
In your-
think the same as classroom.
Okay, okay.
You get 2 classes, you're elementary, correct?
Yes.
You get 2 classes at the same time?
I have 3.
Three
Some-
classes.
Some teachers have 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll stick one para with somebody and then put over 100 kids on the field.
Okay.
And that's an area where, you know, there's much more physical danger to watch out for. And you're outdoors exposed to elements, you're going to get kids inside very quickly. It's just,
Becomes crowd control.
it's an untenable situation in some cases.
Thank you. Anyone else like to offer some comments?
I'll just offer a little bit. My name's Beth, and I'm a teacher here in Polk County, and this is my 23rd year. And I wanted to say thank you to all of you, because I think tonight was very informative for me, and it allows us to come. I have switched from schools to schools to schools many, many times to try and find a place where I felt like everything what I believed in would take place and happen there. I'd stay for a little while and realized that's not the same, and so we didn't have the same, so I'd go somewhere else. So I found a place I absolutely love now. My point is, I've seen a lot from a lot of different places, and there is a lot that's the same, but then there's a lot that could be shared maybe throughout the county, because if this school's doing a good job at something, and then when I moved to this school and they have no idea about it, sometimes I felt like I was going back in time, literally, just from going from school to school. So that might be something just that I thought of tonight as listening to the county, that's one way to get a little bit of continuity in the county that might be helpful. I know we have a high mobility rate of students going from place to place. And then just one other quick note, I had a training this Saturday and was out of school, and they had the hard corner. So I'm sure you guys are aware of that now, but so if this were the classroom, it would have gone from probably behind where Mr. Hill is to the middle of this wall. And the teacher's desk was in that corner. And then that's the doorway. So when I walked in the room, I thought, oh my gosh, this is one of those hard corners that I didn't hear from Polk County. I heard from it on Facebook, which is social media. So I was kind of shocked to actually see it and think, well, that's clearly in the view of being shot. Now, so I don't really know or understand the hard corner, but the teacher that was in there said, I think my assistant principal put that down so the teachers that were there won't get in the teacher's desk. And I was like, no. She goes, so I'm gonna rip that up after the training. I said, no, don't do that. That's stuff they've been putting down in the county. She had no idea. And so I just was kind of shocked to hear something, first of all, that's happening in classrooms where the teachers don't know, and or even maybe the administrator at the school didn't even know, because at my friend's classroom it happened. She came in on Monday and the desks were all over, and here's this caution tape. Literally, she's an older lady. She thought someone had died. She didn't know why the room was like that, and I thought, that's awful, and that's something that really could have been prevented. So we have to do better with things like that, and just make sure that we get it out. Again, it goes back to communication. That might be something that's minor, but we're really protective of our classrooms, and she had to take time to get her room put back the way it was, and you don't sometimes have a lot of time in the mornings before your students come in. So I just wanted to put that out.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
I'm just gonna go back to staff, student advisory council.
Anyone else like to offer comments? Yes, sir.
I'm C.L. Boyd. I've been a school psychologist in this district since 1986. I've seen a lot come, I've seen a lot go. I've seen things come back under different names and they're no more effective than they were when they came the first time around. I do see that one of the big problems in this district historically has been communication. And I definitely agree with Mary Ann that we operate in silos. And sometimes, in the past, I've actually seen it be futile, where departments fight each other, rather than cooperate and work together. From day one when I came to this district, HR was a problem, and it still is. That needs to be cleaned out. It is a terrible situation for an employee, a prospective employee, to come in and be treated the way that that department treats people. Another area which I have spoken to in the past with my administrators, purchasing in this department. I've been involved in technology, in implementing technology within the Student Services Division or department. I can't believe how purchasing has not operated efficiently and actually end up having to pay more money for things which I located for less money and be told that I can't buy them because they're not on the bid list, or we just can't do that. One of my major roles as a school psychologist is to evaluate students and identify those who are in need of exceptional student education. We have had problems for years because we don't have enough people to do the job effectively. And in the past, for example, 8 school psychology positions were cut. And that made more work for every school psychologist and more work for every social worker, because there was not anybody to do the work that needed to be done. And we operate under a system from the state that we have timelines that we have to meet. Your staff right now is extremely stressed because we don't have enough people to do the job that needs to be done. And one of the reasons why we don't have enough people is because we can't get people to come to this county and work, because our salary schedule is way too low. We don't compete with the surrounding counties, and we've lost people to surrounding counties because they could actually do better by going to a new county where there's a better staff ratio and a higher salary. I know 3 people who went to Osceola County from this department and immediately saw a $10,000 raise. What is wrong with this picture? And another thing which I see in terms of timelines, which I think is a liability, it's going to come back on this district. As I said, I have to do an initial evaluation within 60 calendar days. Once my report is done and uploaded into our Accent enriched data system, it sits there forever. I've tested kids last March that are not yet staffed into ESE classes. That to me is bordering on criminal. I believe that is a denial of free and appropriate public education. That you test a kid, you identify the needs, and then nobody holds the staffing for 6 months. What is wrong with this picture? Again, it's too few people to be able to handle the workload that's there. And last thing that I will say is, back to communication. It has been articulated from people in my area that we were not to approach board members, that we were to approach our associate superintendent, and that everything would go through her. And I did communicate with one board member here by email recently, and I said right in the email, I hope that I'm not doing something that I shouldn't be doing. But I just felt that I needed to communicate something directly to that board member based upon what I read in the newspaper on Sunday. So I think there's a great potential in this district. I think there have been changes and improvements since I've been here, but a lot of things need attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Again, we appreciate your comments very much. Anyone else have any comments they would like to share with us? Yes, ma'am.
When you mentioned bringing in professors as guest speakers, would you also consider bringing in agencies, maybe like vocational rehabilitation or trade schools, to discuss how to prepare students that are not on the college-bound path?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's just it's more about having topics.
Right.
You know, like we're a chance where we can explore a topic.
And that,
Thank you.
And that certainly is something that hits my hot button. I think we don't do an appropriate job of getting kids ready for
Yeah, I think that'd be, I think an update on the status of how all the new ESE Stillman Douglas stuff is playing on the ground would be an important thing for us to have, like, more than a work session, or I mean, more than, like, sit here for 2 hours and go through it,
Okay. Well, again, to the folks who came here from the public, thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We appreciate it more than you know. I hope we can continue doing this. We're going to have some discussions. I think maybe what we can do is, and we talked about this, is start the work session part earlier, and then have a time certain for folks from the community to talk to us, and we might schedule that at 6 o'clock or whatever, but we'll talk some more about that later. Any other comments from the board?
I just appreciate people showing up. We don't, there's several people here representing, even ones not asking questions, representing people who teach or parents of children with disabilities. We have zero advocacy in Polk County. We have zero nonprofit advocacy in Polk County, which is very different, because what the gentleman just mentioned in the back would have been brought to the attention, because as Wes probably understands, OCR and state complaints would have followed very quickly in a county with nonprofits who are working in advocacy. So for them to come out and speak about issues we may have, I applaud them doing that. There's no other way for that information to get here, because we don't live in an area that carries that kind of advocacy work like you would see in South Florida or even Orange County. So I appreciate what you're doing here today.
Since I was called out, I will say, I just started my 24th year with the district, so I'm not a newbie. I've been around and I've seen a lot of things, a lot of change. I had a son that come through the ESC program and had lots of issues, and I am excited as a teacher and as a parent that we now have a board that seems to be more cognizant of our population and the struggles that we have in that population. My goal would be, you talk about accountability, there's a lot of things going on out there that if you knew, or if the ledger knew, a lot. And the accountability piece of these kids are bringing in money, federal dollars. It may not be enough, and it probably will never be enough, but there's no accountability to make sure those kids that are bringing those dollars in are getting those services that they need and we're advocating for. It's frustrating, but we do what we do every day because we love those kids and we love our job.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your service to the district. And well said. Thank you for that too. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Any other comments from the board members?
One very last thing. We can't, as a board, go off and talk privately about all the stuff you've said here tonight. And I think that is one thing, the benefit of like the conversation that we had before you guys started to talk, I thought was really helpful. It was informal. We got to kind of hear each other's points of views on things. I think it's important that these meetings do preserve the ability for us to talk to each, because we can't be effective if we can't coordinate to some degree and hash out what we think about things, because we are a political body and we can't act in unison. The law prevents us from doing certain things. So it's really good to have you guys here to have this kind of conversation, but it's also important for us to talk to each other about what we hear. And so I hope we'll balance that in these meetings moving ahead, and that's certainly my intent. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that Ms. Capizzello sent us a list of some concerns, that Mr. Hill was at the PEA board meeting in November, and I actually was there as my last PEA meeting, I guess. And all the things that were discussed out here openly were all brought up right in that meeting, and in detail by individuals that have dedicated their lives to this district, and they're the ones we're losing. That's all I'm going to say. So, it's not the first year teachers I'm really worried about anymore.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Any other comments from the board? So if there is no further business, this meeting's adjourned.